Dear listeners, this is second part of story named Caught Her Secret Affair in Her Own Emails, Betrayal Exposed, Trust Obliterated, Revenge Brewing. So let's start. However, upon hearing the shower running in the master bathroom, Nick swiftly gathered his belongings, exited through the basement door, and drove off in silence, leaving his unsuspecting wife behind. 2 hours later, after a hearty breakfast at the diner, Nick found himself in Harry's office. Harry appeared taken aback. So, you're saying you had your wife sign Form CC 1216? Confirming the divorce filing and relinquishing future service of process and notice of any proceedings? That's correct. The properly certified form is right here. And you're also telling me that you coerced your wife, a seasoned lawyer, in designing a property settlement agreement, transferring all proceeds from the sale of your home and its contents, along with cars and any jewelry she owns, granting you full control over her personal belongings, and allowing both of you to retain your respective retirement accounts with no alimony from you to her despite her higher income? Indeed, she always displayed a very generous demeanor. Harry scrutinized Nick and redirected his focus to the papers on his desk. And you also procured her signature on affidavit wherein she confesses to infidelity, acknowledging her lover's presence in the marital bedroom at the time of signing, following a night of closeness the previous evening. Are you suggesting her affidavit genuinely supports this account? According to the email, she mentions staying with her lover due to his proficiency. Is this the narrative you wish to present, counselor? Nick maintained a neutral expression, struggling to contain his emotions. Let's refrain from insults. The documents are self-explanatory. Harry glanced at the papers, then at Nick, almost smiling before suppressing it, and swiveling in his chair. Damn it, I'll accept the case. You're a respected member of the bar, and an old friend from law school. How was I to know you orchestrated all this? I thought it was legitimate. Your Honor, I'm utterly bewildered. I was blindsided by my client's breach of trust. If anyone's license should be revoked, it's Nicholas Abu Ford, Your Honor. Do you see my stance on this? Nick, I'll pursue it to the bitter end if need be. Will the notary affirm Linda's signature on these documents? Yes, she will. Can she testify to Linda's careful review of the papers? I wouldn't wish to preempt or sway any testimony, but given Linda's legal expertise, I trust she scrutinized the documents diligently. I'm confident the notary will attest to witnessing Linda Abu Ford review and sign each document. As for her comprehension of their contents, I cannot offer an opinion. All right then, said Harry. I'll process all this today, along with Frank's affidavit and report, complete with photos and a DVD. I'll attempt to remove it from the electronic record temporarily. We don't want this to remain in the public eye, do we? No. Nick. Linda's departing for Paris in just over 2 weeks. The longer we keep it concealed, the better. Do you have any connections in district court? Remember Seth? Asked Harry. He was a student, a year junior to us, struggling to secure a position at a law firm. He's now serving as a law clerk in district court to bolster his resume. He could expedite the process, but if the judge insists on live testimony, it could jeopardize everything. Linda must decide not to contest this. For some reason. Should she become aware it could take a turn for the worse? I may need to resign as your attorney. Fair enough, someday you can fill me in on the whole ordeal, but not now. Over the subsequent 2 weeks, Nick kept Linda at a distance. He sent her texts at irregular intervals, citing his busy schedule, and only sporadically answered her calls. As time passed, her calls dwindled. You've spooked her, Frank informed him by week's end. According to our surveillance footage, Dwayne hasn't been at the house since you surprised them on Tuesday morning. I can't ascertain if they rendezvoused at his place during the week or engaged in their activities at the office, but it's evident they're avoiding home. I'll keep you posted if anything changes. The only alteration was Nick's discreet return to the house upon learning Linda had departed to gather the financial documents he deemed necessary. He also finalized a contract with Sam Granger to sell the house, with the sale set to close during Linda's initial week in France. During evenings, Nick frequented the gym, read in his spare time, and pondered how he ended up with such a chaotic life at 30. He informed Sven of his need for a few more weeks of rest, to which Sven reluctantly agreed. She's back to enjoying herself with him in the house, Frank informed him on Saturday, a week before Linda's Paris trip. Thanks for the heads up, Nick replied, though indifferent. He knew he'd rather incinerate the sheets than sell them when he abandoned the house. By then, Nick had already viewed the video Frank provided, revealing Dwayne's allure. Dwayne, a few years younger, was a gym regular, known for pre-weight training mirror rituals. Otherwise unremarkable, Dwayne embodied a superficial ideal Nick could have done without. Before he knew it, Linda embarked on her long-awaited Paris trip. One of Frank's associates shadowed her to the airport, waiting until her departure for Europe. Upon receiving the news, Nick entered the house, consolidated Linda's clothes in the living room, and packed his belongings. The next day, movers boxed Linda's clothing and sent it to storage, while Nick's possessions were moved to the apartment he secured with Sam Granger's assistance. A proficient house liquidator, Nick easily sold the furniture. Once the house was emptied, Nick took a final stroll before executing his ultimate task. He meticulously gathered the wedding photographs, album, and Linda's wedding dress, placing them in the patio fire pit beneath the treehouse. After adding lighter fluid and igniting a match, he watched as the memories turned to ashes. After the blaze, Nick was satisfied to find that the video captured ample detail. Each photo added to the pit depicted vivid memories of their time together. The following day, Nick finalized the sale of their family home, using his wife's power of attorney, which she should have reviewed. With a separate financial power of attorney, Nick managed to deposit the sale proceeds, access his personal account acting on behalf of his wife, and close joint accounts. 3 days later, however, during Linda's initial week in France, a construction crew demolished the house, clearing debris swiftly before commencing site preparation. Unfortunately, the tree, once a playground favorite for children, had to be removed. A gazebo now stood in its place. Regrettably, construction halted abruptly as the cherished home site transitioned into an empty square of land. It appeared there were issues with the permitting process. Nick and a law school friend, employed in the county permitting department, were confident the issue would resolve upon Linda's return from France, once the appropriate forms were received and approved. Throughout this period, Nick ignored all attempts at communication from Linda, issuing calls, texts, emails, and voicemails. Despite outreach from her friends and relatives, Nick replied swiftly, informing them he was occupied in traveling, primarily to deter them from driving by the house and encountering him. El Diablo reached out on Nick's prepaid cell phone, mentioning that Linda and Dwayne appeared strained and unhealthy, hinting at possible suspicions. When Nick inquired how he obtained this information, El Diablo simply stated his wide network of connections, even across Europe. He then proposed returning Linda's wedding and engagement rings, to which Nick declined. El Diablo asked if someone else could purchase them, to which Nick adamantly refused but eventually relented, suggesting he might know a potential buyer. 2 days before Linda's scheduled return from Paris, Nick found himself in Harry's office. I have no idea how this happened, but here's the divorce decree. It's much quicker than usual for such cases, Harry remarked, with Seth remaining silent. I don't inquire or speculate. Consider yourself fortunate and celebrate your newfound single status. Here's the copy I'll be sending to your ex-wife, I'm sure she'll be pleased. As Nick approached his car outside Harry's office, an unfamiliar number rang his phone, however. Upon answering, he recognized El Diablo's voice. Nick, you should take a vacation immediately. Go somewhere crowded where people know you and can vouch for your presence. With that, El Diablo disconnected the call. Nick realized it had been ages since he saw his college friends in New York. Fortunately, his schedule was open for the next few days, so he embarked on a trip the same day. He visited several exhibitions, explored numerous museums, and socialized over lunches, coffees, and dinners with different groups of friends, covering most expenses with his credit card. He also tipped generously at his hotel to ensure recognition from all the staff. While there, he expressed mail to DVD copy, depicting him burning Linda's wedding dress and album to her parents' house. Late Sunday evening, after savoring coffee and pastries in Little Italy in Manhattan, Nick's phone rang. It was his father-in-law. Nick, where are you? Linda is in a frenzy. She's in the hospital. Yes? What's the matter? This was becoming intriguing. She returned from her trip on Friday, but she and her colleague were apparently abducted from the airport. They emerged this morning, both under the influence of medications. Her colleague was severely beaten, and Linda, here his father-in-law's voice faltered. What about Linda? She woke up covered in tattoos from head to toe, tattoos with dreadful inscriptions. And as soon as she woke and saw this, a masked man entered and struck her nose, breaking it. Then he inflicted 2 black eyes with 2 more blows. Impressive, Nick pondered. It was the perfect ending. He wouldn't mind if Linda realized his betrayal, just as she betrayed him in their marriage. It would be worth a soul, if he possessed one. I'm sorry to hear that. I'm out of town presently. What do you need me to do? Nick sensed surprise on the other end of the line. You're her husband. She's your wife. Not anymore, we divorced. The court finalized it last week. She's cheating on me with the man she's traveling with. What? How? Here, what's unclear? Nick knew he was being excessively cruel now, but he didn't care. I have a video I can send you a copy of her engaging in bed acts. Not with me if you'd like to know. Silence followed on the other end. Nick wondered if his father-in-law had suffered a heart attack. We're done with her, so you'll have to bring her home. She's not my responsibility now. You did it, his father-in-law exclaimed. I've been in New York since Wednesday celebrating my divorce. Look, I understand you're upset and I hope Linda recovers soon, but I don't think we have anything else to say to each other. He ended the call. At that instant, Nick realized the urban stress had become overwhelming. He emailed Sven bluntly, stating that he and the firm could go to hell respectfully. A quick online search revealed an REI store in Soho, prompting Nick to equip himself with new hiking and camping gear. Since Linda never enjoyed hiking, this was an opportunity for Nick to reconnect with his intelligence background. The hotel kindly stored his luggage for a reasonable fee, allowing him to venture into the Adirondack Mountains to immerse himself in nature until things settled down. Fortunately, he had his passport in case he decided to visit Canada. As it turned out, he did. For the next 8 weeks, Nick mostly ignored his phone. Initially, the barrage of messages, resembling frantic screams and tears, made it seem like someone had hijacked his ex-wife's phone. Unable to sift through them all, he listened to only a couple before deleting the rest, along with numerous bizarre emails. Clearly, her account must have been compromised. Finding time to read through it all seemed impossible. Nick hoped the troubled woman behind the messages would seek the help she urgently needed. 8 weeks later, Nick met Frank and Harry for drinks. Just to clarify, Harry began once they were settled, I terminated our attorney-client Relationship right after I provided you with the divorce decree. I notified you via registered mail. Perhaps you haven't checked your email yet. Nick admitted he hadn't. It's quite a storm. Buddy, remarked Terry. Frank added, more like a typhoon. I'm all for it, plenty of havoc. Harry finished his bourbon and ordered another. Frank began detailing the events. So on Monday morning, the former Mrs. Buford arrived at her previous residence with her parents. We never got around to removing the external camera. Upon seeing the empty lot, she experienced a complete breakdown, falling to her knees in tears and assuming the fetal position. It culminated in her kicking and screaming like a toddler at the mall by late afternoon. Later, when a work crew arrived, she had another outburst. Despite having raccoon eyes from the beating and a bandage on her broken nose, Harry then took up the narrative. That afternoon, she, along with a couple of attorneys from her prestigious firm, stormed into my humble office in a threatening manner. Since they had no appointment, I kept them waiting for 25 minutes. I ensured my Glock was loaded and placed on my desk. Thank goodness for Virginia laws. After the wait, they all yelled at me discussing urgent motions, bar complaints, and contempt proceedings. I must confess it was hard not to notice the tattoos all over her face, vividly inked in red and blue for visibility. Once I managed to regain focus, Harry continued. I inquired about the exact issue causing their aggression, asking if there were any false statements. They paused, exchanging glances. So I questioned them about the controversy surrounding your ex-wife's alleged infidelity. They all affirmed it. I then played a video I had prepared while they waited, showing Mrs. Buford engaging in bed activity with someone other than her husband in the marital bed. Clearly, they hadn't thoroughly reviewed the entire case file yet. Harry continued. Then they all just appeared perplexed. Linda started screaming that you didn't even give her a chance to explain herself, and I responded, saying you weren't concerned about the reason. You just took action. She regained composure and began arguing that she never consented to you selling the house. She questioned the rationale behind burning her wedding dress, photos, and albums as they were her personal belongings. I presented her with copies of the powers of attorney, one specifically granting authorization to sell the house. I showed her the property settlement agreement, granting you discretion to dispose of her personal belongings, and reminded her she was fortunate to retain her clothing. I inquired whether she disputed her signature on the documents. While she admitted it was hers, she insisted she hadn't agreed to the contents. Then I questioned if her defense rested on her failure to read what she signed. I prompted her to envision the scrutiny during cross-examination if she challenged anything in court. She fell silent at this point. I also referenced the affidavit she signed, acknowledging her lover's presence upstairs at the time of signing, and asked if this was accurate. She then lost consciousness. Her companions attempted to revive her, but I had already dialed emergency services. Despite their insistence, she refused to accompany them to the hospital. However, she began shouting about tattoos and her boyfriend being assaulted, Harry added. I clarified that these matters were unrelated to you. As far as I knew, you were out of town anyway. I suggested that perhaps Dwayne had provoked a husband, either of another woman he was involved with, or someone who felt Linda was taking him away. I informed them they could address any potential criminal case with the Fairfax Police Department. Then things took an interesting turn. Harry continued. They persisted in discussing filing a motion for reconsideration and similar actions. That's when I informed them that earlier that morning, I had received an anonymous email containing links to several videos of Linda and Dwayne in your bed, engaging in bed activities before their trip to Paris. The message threatened to distribute the videos to everyone Linda knew, asserting that you, Nick, were unaware and powerless to prevent it. They claimed to be allies, citing past assistance from you, and pledged to shield you. They warned of sending the videos that day if she didn't drop the matter. Are you aware of this? I was out of town, Nick replied. Harry, afterward they departed. I haven't heard from them since, and there were no incidents. At the courthouse, Frank resumed. They likely contacted the police because a couple of detectives arrived. They requested copies of the videos and filed a report. Then their interest waned. Neither Linda nor Dwayne could provide details. They only recalled getting into a taxi at the airport, then waking up in the hospital. Linda discovered herself in a CD hotel room, having been assaulted before seeking medical attention. The room charges, along with room service and many bar expenses, were billed to a credit card. This time Nick mentioned that the hotel manager had informed him that New York police had investigated his stay, and his New York acquaintances had been approached. However, they all confirmed his active presence in the city. Word on the street Harry mentioned is that your ex is holed up in her parents' basement getting laser tattoo removal. The snag is, they charge by the square inch and she's inked from head to toe. It's bound to rack up tens of thousands of dollars, and yet the marks will linger indefinitely. It's regrettable, Nick remarked. Harry fixed his gaze on Nick. Frank simply pressed his lips together to stifle laughter. What about your paramour? Harry asked. He took quite a beating. He's in for extensive physical therapy. He suffered some head trauma, multiple concussions. He might struggle to land another paralegal gig. Their firm cut ties with them both. Seems their relationship soured during the trip, and somehow it adversely impacted the entire arbitration. They were ill-prepared, short on documents, unready, objections, problematic witnesses. They lost on the merits. Client wasn't pleased. Firm had to make some personnel sacrifices to salvage future work. One of these days, Nick, you'll have to divulge how you handled all this, Frank suggested. Handled what? I'm as innocent as a Boy Scout. Maggie waited in the car as Nick disembarked. I'm a bit peeved no one bothered to inquire if I actually notarized the documents or if she read them before signing. I was prepared to testify that I witnessed her scrutinizing each one, but I couldn't gauge how much time she spent on it. Let's hash this out over dinner. I owe you and your boyfriend for aiding me and regaining my freedom. Maggie turned to him, peering over her sunglasses as Nick backed out of the parking spot. There's no guy, you dummy. Nick breaks suddenly, meeting her gaze. Seriously? Absolutely. Now zip it and drive me home so you can commence the rather lengthy and grueling process of making amends. Sure thing, Nick grinned. But first, I need to swing by the post office. For what? Sending a card to an old friend, Nick replied, retrieving it from the glove compartment. It bore the Boy Scouts emblem. I'll ask her, does she feel safe now? Safe. Dear listeners, thanks for listening this story. We will meet you in next one.